Can you please give a brief introduction of yourself, let that be academic, personal, professional life?
So to speak a little bit about myself, my name is Emily Sappington. I'm the VP of Product at an AI startup called Context Scout. Context Scout is essentially AI in the browser. So we are able to read the pages you're on and go search for relevant information to cut down on research time. That's what I currently do for my job. I've spent the last 4 years of my career at Microsoft working in AI for Windows, as well as a bit of work in HoloLens and VR. In addition to that, before I was at Microsoft, I got my master's at Carnegie Mellon. And for undergraduate degrees, I have a degree in psychology as well as design from Parsons School of Design.
Okay. So how do you think those experiences and your academic background helped you form your career path or decide your job now?
I would say that throughout my career, it's been an iterative process to find where I am today, to find that I wanted to work in tech in the first place, to find the right way to combine psychology and design. It was something that I tried over and over throughout different jobs and coursework.
So let's say anything other than your studies that can be about your trips or your part-time job or your childhood memory?
So I was fortunate that when I was in school in New York City, there were a lot of internships available, and so I decided to take advantage of that. Over the course of my education, I think I had about 8 internships. The reason I had 8 internships is because this was an iterative process of finding out what I wanted to do. So I started off, the combination of psychology and design is often a good fit for advertising, so I did a few internships in that space and enjoyed it, but felt that there was more I could do to use psychology to help people. So tried different things. I also worked in exhibition design, which I enjoyed because it was about designing the experience of moving through a museum or a gallery. And once I landed on interaction design and user experience design, for me that's where everything fit together perfectly. And it took all those other internships for me to learn the bits and pieces I wanted to hold on to and the aspects of those jobs that I wasn't interested in continuing on with for the rest of my career. Throughout my time, I did advertising, which was very interesting, and I learned that I like working with big companies, with clients. I thought that was an interesting thing for my career. One thing that I also learned was I enjoyed publications and websites, so I worked for a wine magazine. And while that was very fun, and I learned a lot about wine, which was great, I learned that, at least in that environment, I didn't feel the design was elevated enough. It was more putting the finishing touches on brilliant writing that sommeliers were doing. So I wanted a role where design was elevated in decision making. So all of those taught me different lessons about what I was looking for in a career, what I wanted to have my day-to-day work be like, the sort of environment I enjoyed, a corporate environment versus very small.
How would you advise those students who are not entirely sure about which path to continue?
I think the best advice I could give would be to intern as much as possible. I should also note paid internships are a thing, and you should expect to be paid for real work that you're doing. But the great thing about it is you get real world experience, but if you find that you're in a job that you don't really like, it's over in 3 months. And that's much better than committing yourself to a career for a long time, and switching jobs is much harder than switching internships once you're finished.
Would you be able to give some tips on how to develop your own network and create a new one?
Certainly. The best advice I could give students would be to take advantage of being a student while you still are. When you enter the real world, it's not the same to get a cold email from someone. But for instance, the best advice I got when I was a student was to just cold email people if you're interested in their company and see if you could take them out for an informational interview. It's not asking for an internship. It's not asking for anything of them other than to just spend a few minutes telling you about what you do for a living. So I went and traveled around Europe, and I thought this was between my undergraduate and my master's. And I thought I want to learn more about the design scene in Amsterdam and London. So I thought, why not just write to a few agencies I was interested in. And often it was lower level people in the company that could take the time for a 30-minute coffee, and I would treat them to a coffee and just ask them about their day-to-day life, sometimes what it was like moving to another country. And it's something that as a student, we've all been students. We all want to help students out. And so it's something that when people reach out to me, I take them up on as well.
So since you're from the States and you're currently working abroad in London, how did you find all those process of being an international professional, like getting a new job in a completely different setting? How did you find that process?
Yeah, for me, it was helpful in the travels that I did and having these sort of cold calls that turned into coffees. What I learned was when it comes to hiring from overseas, you had to really stand out. They had to do a lot to explain why they had to go outside of the country to get unemployment. So what I found, for me anyway, that made sense was to wait until I had expertise in a certain area and then try to work abroad. So the beginning of my career was in the US. And then before I came to London, I applied for the Exceptional Talent Visa. And this is a program with Technation and the UK government that awards people visas independent of companies, basically. So for me, that was the stability that I felt comfortable with for moving abroad.
So do you have any like other general tips that you could share? Maybe not as much like industry specific, but in general?
I would say, yeah, first impressions are key. So for me as a designer, I'm all about putting the time in to have a nice, clean looking layout for your CV. There's lots of inspiration online that you can look up for that. But I would say taking the time to make sure that if you have a CV, it looks really tight and nice and that everything has been proofread. If you have a website or a portfolio, make sure that that reflects the best side of you, and you know, blog as well, because all these things are what people find when they go to look for you for a role. So,
can you give me 5 points of what you'll be looking for in a candidate?
Definitely. The candidates that stand out to me when I've done recruiting have been those that are generally really interested. I used to do recruiting with Microsoft, and I found that if they showed up saying, I just want to work on this one project and this one specific thing, that was helpful. But I was always really happy to hear if they were interested in a broad spectrum of different things that they wanted to work on. If they were interested in technology of all different means and modalities, for me that was exciting. I would love to see the sort of things they got up to outside of school. For me that was nice to see if they had extracurriculars, any projects they did in their free time. It makes them stand out a little bit. I think a lot of people can sign up for a class, a more passive sort of extracurricular activity, but if they made a project or they entered a competition, that always impressed me that they took the initiative. So, and for me, a lot of that is because I would recruit designers, a lot of that is reflected in their portfolio. So when they have portfolio pieces that show, well, this was the assignment for school, but I really wanted to take it further, so this is what I added to it. And that elevated them a bit in my eyes.
How do you balance your personal and work life?
I think that because I went through this iterative process of making sure I'm really happy with my career and with the work that I do every day, I feel very fortunate that I don't have as much of that burnout. I don't mind if I have to work a bit on a weekend some days. So I don't feel that I need to work on that balance so much because I think I really enjoy what I do. That said, I think it's so important, especially as a designer, to enrich yourself in various different ways. So one of the ways I do that is I volunteer with a college for digital skills here in London. And so doing so, I think you keep a finger on the pulse of where design is going from an education standpoint. I also think it's important as a designer to not forget my roots in fine arts. So I paint and I draw and I go to art museums on the weekends and sketch the sculptures. The advice I would give is take the time to find a career that you're passionate about. It will change over the years, but use your time as a student. Use that time that you can iterate and quickly change internships because it is harder when you're in the real world. So this is the time to find what you'd like to do. Take advantage of all the resources you can, take advantage of being a student, and really think about what you want to be doing after you graduate.